Welcome to SQL Server online seminar. This video I'm going to show you how to connect a SQL Server through internet. Before we can connect the internet, so we have to find out some steps to fix an easy way to connect the SQL Server through the internet. First step, we have to find out IP address for the SQL Server machine. What does it mean? It means we have to find out the IP address in a system where we install the SQL Server. See, now I install my SQL Server here. So now I want to find out my IP address. Let's go on here and go to the command prompt and then ipconfig. Here I can see the details of my IP address on my current local system. So this is the IP address for 192.168.1.10. That means this is the IP address for current machine, and the default gateway, which means that my router which is using that IP address and passing the signal to all my machines through the router. So 192.168.1.1. So this is the router IP address. Then after that, what I have to do, I have to make it IP address as a static. What does it means? That means when I reboot my machine or when I reboot my router, the IP address keep changing because based on the load and everything. So what I have to do, I have to fix my IP address for the SQL Server machine. That means when I because when I restart my router or when I restart my system, the system automatically use the same IP address which I given in the system settings. So how can I do that? Here we have to go control panel and the networking and the status. Here is the local area connection, and then properties, then IP4, and you have to give the particular IP address for the machine. So which means when you mention the name here or the number here, that means this is the static IP address, and this is the gateway. When I see when I get a results, okay, when we get the results from the ipconfig, we have to match the same results in this setting. So here IP address means whatever the IP address you can give here, and the subnet mask, which means with the value which is provided by your internet service provider. So based on that, you have to match the values 255 here, and then default gateway that I mentioned to you already, which is coming from the router. So 192.168.1.1. So this is the important thing, DNS server addresses. So preferred and alternate DNS server numbers which is provided by the internet service provider. Let's see, for example, if you have a Comcast, so you can go and search by preferred DNS and alternate DNS server for Comcast. So they give you some numbers, then you have to enter the number in this property settings. So once you click OK, then automatically the machine will be used the same static IP address all the time. So what happened when router see the signal, then router will automatically send the same IP address to this machine. Okay, then after that, what we have to do is we have to find out port address for the SQL Server. See, when we see the default port number for SQL Server is 1433, that is default. But keep in mind, when you install the different kind of named instances after the default port number is 1433, but named instance port number will be changed alternately by dynamically. What happened when you restart the SQL Server services, particularly that instance keep changing the port number. So when I see here SQL Server 2008 R2, then configuration tools, then SQL Server configuration manager, See here, we have a different kind of SQL Server services. I install this is the default instance, and I install the other two named instances. One is core dev and core QA. When we come into here, the SQL Server network configuration, we can see the port numbers here. For the default, when I see the default port number, what happened here is 1433. Keep in mind, this is the port number for all the SQL Server. Whatever the number you put here, that is the port number for SQL Server. So the default one is 1433. But at the same time, when you want to connect the SQL Server through the internet, you should have to enable the protocol TCP/IP, which is connected through the internet. So here I install another two instances, core QA and core dev. By default, without any changing, the SQL Server will be used different dynamic port numbers. For example, what does it mean? If using the 65004 here, so the SQL Server, when we restart the same instance, the SQL Server will change the port number by dynamically. How can it generate it? Because based on this particular operating system, the SQL Server will be look at the operating system and particular all the port numbers. Okay, this port number is using for this source and this port number is using for this source. Okay, then what are the available port numbers? So get in SQL Server use available port number. So in that scenario, it's really very tough to connect the SQL Server through the internet, because the port number, once you port number change, it's very hard to connect it. Then how can we fix it? We have to make it static port number. So that means once you enter the one number, whatever the number, here I enter the 65004. That means this is use the SQL Server static port number. The SQL Server, this instance, always use the same port number. So here again same thing, I use the another port number for the dev is 52108. So we fixed all the static IP address, and we fix the SQL Server static port number for the different instances, but the SQL Server default instance is automatically used 1433. Okay, what are the next step? Then SQL Server browser. The SQL Server browser is one of the important thing to connect the internet through the internet. Okay, so now I already installed the SQL Server browser when I installed the SQL Server installation. And then I want to show you the services. See here, I already installed the SQL Server browser for all the instances on the same machine. So once I enable the SQL Server browser, should run automatically along with the SQL Server services. So these are the simple steps. We can do it by the DBA. But now let's actual pictures coming right now. How can we open the firewall settings? Because the firewall is the key important thing for the internet from the outside. Whenever any user connecting from the outside, the firewall will be blocked. So we have to be enable the firewall settings for the SQL Server to allow the particular users. Okay, let's go here. I can search the firewall. So here I search the firewall. So one of the options we have to enable, first let's go to the allow a program through the Windows firewalls. So here this is the key thing which is blocking or allowing your system from the outside users. So the system we have to set up to allow the outside users. Now I already entered here the SQL Server. How can I have to do it? Let's go on here. When you open this, automatically the boxes will come here. So when you check the box SQL Server, and when you allow the home network and public network, so the SQL Server, that means the operating system open the port for allowing the SQL Server users from the outside through the internet. So this is the SQL Server default. But keep in mind, the SQL Server only available in this. So we have to add SQL Server browser How can we add? Let's go here, change settings, allow another program, open the browser, and then let's go to the C drive, program files, and then SQL Server. So once go here, the SQL Server, so you can automatically search here SQL Server, SQL browser. So that means you see the SQL Server browser. So once you click it, once you add this, when you click add it, so automatically it will be add here. So once you add it here, you have to enable to allow the private and public network. So this is the SQL Server automatically there, but you have to add a SQL Server browser service .exe file. So when you go there, allow the another program and just add it from the where you install the SQL Server. Okay, now let's click on the OK. So then we enable the firewall settings to allow the SQL Server users from the outside through the internet. So once I enable the firewall settings, then we have to add SQL Server browser and SQL Server for all port numbers. Let's go in here again, another firewall settings. Let's go here, Windows Advanced Firewall Settings. You have inbound rule. So click new inbound rule, select port and all the port numbers. I prefer all port numbers, and so just all the connections, domain, whatever, all the provider and domain, give the name whatever it is, SQL Server, something like that. So I already given here, that's why I'm not adding. I can show you. See here, I added the SQL Server. So when you see the protocol, I already added all the enabled ports should be connected from this computer. Okay, up to this point we are good, because we install the SQL Server and we enable the firewall settings, and we install the SQL Server browser, and we change the static port number as well as static IP address for the machine. Now first of all, I want to check that, okay, now everybody can connect the instance to the name, but I want to check that, okay, my IP address is connecting or not, because so what is the system IP address for this? So this is the system IP address which we given the static 192.168.1.0. Okay, now I'm going to see what happened. This is the machine name and this is the instance core QA. Now I want to change this to the IP address. What the IP address here? 192. Okay, I have already here. Okay, 192.168.10, then core QA. See here we connected. Okay, from the system, from locally we connected the SQL Server through the IP address. Now we have to connect the same IP address whatever through the internet from the outside user. How? Before we go to that, everybody should have to check the public IP address for your provider. Like every home or every office, once you connect the internet service from the provider, everybody should have a public IP address. So how can I find the public IP address? What is my IP.com? This is the website which is give for the public IP address. So public IP address means any outside user can connect and through the internet on any machine from this system. So here this is my public IP address. So now I have to connect the public IP address. So before we connect the public IP address, because any outside user can't connect through directly to the system, because okay, I use the public IP address, but we have a middle layer is router. So we have to enable the router settings, because the router is the middle layer from the outside user and from the internet and the machine. Okay, now any outside provider, any router providers like Linksys or Netgear. So any provider, you have to enable the port forwarding option. So port forwarding option on your router with the SQL Server ports. What exactly means is, let's see, mine is a Linksys service. So now how can I connect the Linksys service? Because that's what I told you, default gateway, which is the router IP address 192.168.1.1. So once I enter this, the router will allow me to change the settings, because that is the IP address. We can change it. So this is my IP address. So if you go in anywhere in the Netgear or any application, there should be an option called port forwarding. Port forwarding means, so for example, outside user, he is using the public IP address. Like let's assume, let's think like this is my IP address. So once the person is using this IP address, so the router, what happened? Okay, it's a SQL server. For example, we are connecting the IP address to the SQL server. So okay, SQL server is using your public IP address. So when the SQL server connecting the IP address, automatically we given the port number, right? 1433. 1433 is a default port number. So you have to be external port and internal port the same number, and the IP address. So okay, the user connected my public IP address on the SQL server, and what happened, we given the name. Okay, this machine I have an instance, what is called instance, the core QA with this IP address. Okay, anybody can connect the public IP address / core QA. When the user given this name, the router, what router should act? Okay, we got another one instance, that is okay 1433 port number, and directly the router will come to the machine where we install the SQL server, because when the router will send a lot of information to the different kind of machines. So different kind of machine, each machine has a different local port IP address. So we have to be fix that particular IP address and particular port number on the SQL server. Not only SQL server, any kind of, you enable the FTP websites, or if you enable any IIS configuration, whatever it is, you have to enable the port forwarding, give the port number and give the IP address. So we have to given the IP address for the default. At the same time, I mentioned to you the SQL server named instances. So we have a different kind of named instances. So we given the different kind of port numbers. So now at the same time, I'm allowing the same different kind of port numbers for the different instances to connect the same machine. And we given the SQL Server browser. Keep in mind, SQL Server browser as a default port number 1434. So even we should have to allow the same port number 1434. Okay, now I enable and I save the settings. So once you save the settings, you have to reboot your router settings. Okay, now when I connected this, see here, I got an error, login failed error, because Windows authentication is not used through the internet, because I am using the public IP address. So Windows authentication will not allow to use. So always whenever the user come from the outside, he has to use the SQL Server authentication. Okay, now let's connect it just with the local first, because I want to show you the user I already created here. Okay, so here I already created the users. Now I'm going to connect the same machine through the public IP address with the users, SQL Server users. Okay, let's use see, now I connect the SQL Server through the public IP address. If you have any domain name, this is point out to the public IP address, so you can connect it here. So before we go, just repeat again very quick steps. First, we have to find out the IP address for the SQL Server machine, make it as a fixed IP address, and then after that find out the port number for the SQL Server. the default everybody knows, but it varies on the different kind of SQL Server instances. Then you have to enable the SQL Server firewall settings, and along with that you have to install the SQL Server browser. So once you've done that, you have to be verified with your public IP address, and you have to change your port forwarding option on the router. So then after that you can connect your public IP address. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe more videos on SQL Server online training channel on YouTube, or follow my blog SQL Server online.blogspot.com.